Hi, and welcome to another episode of Small Business CFOs. Now, on today's episode, we're going to dive into a topic that's very, very relevant because a lot of people are looking at PPP loans and even just financing in general. So, this is a very important topic that a lot of people should, really pay attention to. And that topic is, or let me just say, I'm just going to get to the punchline. Not every type of money is good money for your business. So as a business owner, you need to understand what is good money and what would probably bad money for your business. And we're going to dive in a bit deeper because there are a lot of people that are asking about, hey, the PPP money and wait, should I take or can I go take a loan out because, hey, of this and that. And I'm like, okay, let's actually dive into it. Let's understand some stuff because there are some people that we've talked about it and discussed it, and we've come to a conclusion that, you know what, you shouldn't go for the money because it wasn't right for their business. And we're going to talk about that in this episode. So I want to welcome to the show my lovely CFO wife, Lola. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Terrell. Thank you for having me. Wait, no, this is my show too. Hey! We're happy to be here.
Awesome.
Yes.
Let's just cut to the chase for people. I mean, when it comes down to, to businesses trying to get access to capital, what are some of your thoughts? I mean, when you hear someone saying like, oh, there's PPP money, I need to go out and get it. What are your thoughts?
Read the fine print. I think that's always kind of my caution because I think a lot of times, and you think about this, if you kind of go back to, when you were maybe in college. This happened to me when I was in college and I was, trying to build my credit. That whole thing of like where people are like, you have independence, you're living off campus, or, you kind of have a sense of, you feel like you're grown basically. And, you have basically banks that try to give you loans or credit cards, and it's this whole thing of growing your credit. But really, when you don't read the fine print, what you end up finding out is a lot of times you're like, oh, well, I can just use my credit card and pay whenever I have the money. But the reality is you're going to be getting charged interest for that, right? And I know that's probably the simplest example, but I think any situation where you're getting a loan, any situation where you're getting even what a lot of people will consider to be free money, you always have to read the fine print. And by fine print in this case, one, I think you need to understand, why am I even eligible to get this money? Because you want to make sure that you're eligible to qualify for what you're applying for, so you don't basically end up being charged with committing fraud. Like, you don't want to do that. So first, understand if you're eligible for this. And I think with the PPP loan, one of the things that I've seen is, we're not discouraging people from applying. In fact, I know Terrell's helped a few of our clients go through the process, but understanding just in general when it comes to not just the PPP loan, but money overall is just, do I qualify? One, because I think that's important. And then secondly, like, what does it entail? Like, what do I have to do to make sure that I'm keeping up with the requirements that I met by qualifying? And then also making sure that, hey, I have a plan in the event that I need to pay this back, or if there's a time frame and it's a loan, hey, what's my plan to actually pay it back?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny that you brought up the example of college because I think back when I was in college, one of the things that used to, I wouldn't say it bothered me. I was a little jealous at times where when I look and I'd see, around the beginning of the year, like some of my classmates were getting like, new car. I guess it was a used car, but it was new to them, where they were getting new cars and stuff. And I'm like, man, how were you guys able to afford that? Like, I'm working like 2 jobs to help pay my living expenses because I had an apartment and pay off, the loan that I had on the car that I was driving at the time. So I'm like, I'm trying to take care of those responsibilities, but how are you guys able to afford it? And one of the friends told me, he was like, oh, it's just, when they looked at it was a refund check. And I was like, a refund check from what?
Yeah.
And what they did was, they were approved for X amount of dollars. So let's say if they were approved for $10,000, well, when it came back, they only needed $5,000 to pay for their school expenses. So in their mind, they were like, hey, this is free money. I'm gonna just take that extra $5,000 and then go spend it on something. Now, fast forward. I mean, I graduated in 2007. So fast forward, 13, 14 years later, some of those people are still paying on their student loan debt because I think they didn't really understand, the reality of, hey, this isn't just free money. Like, if
Yeah,
you
and
aren't, oh, go ahead.
that's no, I was gonna say that's actually a question I had because when I first came to the States, like I'd been in America at the point when I started college, I'd been in the States for like 2, 3 years at that point, and I would just see people basically the same thing you mentioned. Like they would have designer purses and they'd have a bunch of money, like, and it always happened right around a few weeks into the semester. And I'm like, okay, so they must have been working one heck of a summer job because I don't understand where this money's coming from. But to your point, like to be honest, I didn't even know that that thing was a loan until like I was like, oh, I connected the dots. I'm like, oh, they have to pay this money back when they graduate. And I don't think a lot of people understood that. But yeah, that's a really good, interesting that you bring that point up because I actually didn't find out until a few weeks ago that that was actually the student loans. So, yeah,
Unfortunately, it's a common thing that a lot of people get into where, when they hear about, hey, there's money available. Oh, let me go out and get this money because I have some things I want to do with it. And one of the things that I tell people is, all right, you know, even in your personal life, it's kind of a different conversation, but definitely when it comes to your business, what I tell them is, hey, take a step back. What are you going to do with the money once you get it? And
yeah.
usually their first answer is, oh, I'm gonna pay for this. I'm like, okay. Let's talk a little bit more. Let's be a little bit more precise because, as my role as a CFO for their business, my job is to help them make smart money decisions. So what I go back to them and say, okay, all right, let's say, outside of the PPP forgivable loans, let's just talk about a loan in general. If you take this money, what are going to be the payment terms and what's the interest rate? And then ask yourself, whatever you're going to do with this money, is it going to help you start making more money so that you're making enough additional money to now pay the payments plus the interest on this loan? Because if you're going to take this money and you're going to go do something that's not going to actually grow your business, the only thing you're doing is adding costs for you to have to pay back later.
I have a question. So, in that situation, what would be a situation where you would spend that money on something that actually makes you more money in your business versus spending it on something that doesn't really provide a benefit from a business growth standpoint?
Yeah, so for some businesses, let's say, if you're taking out a loan because you're trying to expand your business. Let's say, if you own a store or whatever and you want to increase the capacity, so you're trying to, knock down a wall, add more seating, or you're trying to add a delivery truck to your business so you can actually get your products to more people. When you're doing things like that to where this action or this thing that I'm spending the money on is going to allow me to make more money because I'll either be able to deliver more of my product, or I'll be able to help more customers, or I'll be able to bring more customers in. Or even if, let's say, if you're upgrading, let's say, a technology or a software system that will allow you to stay in better contact with your customers so you can either upsell your customers or you can stop losing customers because you're going to be able to stay in touch with them. You're going to be able to understand more of what they need. Like, is this money going to allow you to increase the revenue and the income for your business is the question that I would ask people. Now, we're in a unique situation when it comes down to PPP
Yeah,
because
that was
with
going to be what I
PPP,
mentioned.
a lot of people are using the money to then fund a expense that they have, whether it's funding payroll and stuff like that. And I guess in an indirect way, you can say, hey, by paying my people well, it keeps them around so they can continue, servicing the client. But I think the dynamics with the PPP becomes a little different when you look at, okay, all right, and what I'm going to use the money for, is it actually a forgivable activity that I'm going to use the money for? Because if I'm going to use the money to do things that are forgivable, like I'm going to use it for 60% on payroll, use it for, covering my lease, my utilities. And I think with round two, you can use it for like software and stuff to support your business. If I'm going to use it for those things, when I start looking at the business case for getting this money, okay, I'm going to use it for those activities, which makes the loan forgivable. Now, if the loan is going to be forgivable, that is only because, like I said, you had a plan for how you were going to use it and you actually stuck to the plan to use it for that thing.
Okay. Okay. So, like in this situation, for example, where, a business owner might say, hey, like I took the PPP loan to help my business stay afloat, right? To keep employees paid because I didn't have as much revenue coming in as what I used to have, with the pandemic. And, like, for example, a restaurant not having as many clients or just people kind of being a bit, I guess, shy when it comes to making purchases just in any business. So I guess one of the questions that I would have is if I'm sitting and I kind of already know the answer to this, but I think this is a good discussion point, is if I was in a position where I needed to take out the PPP loan, I'm complying with what I need to cover in terms of the requirements that it meets. Like I need to use it for employee payroll, whatever it is. What would be your advice to someone when it's like, in terms of thinking about like creating a plan for, hey, in the event that you may need to pay this back and it's not forgivable, like what things would you say, whether it's one or two things, like, hey, you should be doing this, like you've gotten the loan, it's helping sustain your business, but hey, these are some other things you need to be looking at to keep the business
Yeah,
going.
I mean, and I would say there are some people, like I said, that there's a couple of clients that or businesses that I've looked at. They took out a PPP loan. Now, what they use the money for, or like say, they don't have enough eligible expenses to make
Mm-hmm.
the loan completely forgivable. So they need to be prepared and have a strategy for being able to pay the loan back. And what I
Mm-hmm.
always tell them is, it comes down to the economics of, the deal economics is kind of what I call it, or the economics of your business. It's just saying, okay, all
Mm-hmm.
right, if you know that you're going to have to pay this loan back, let's look at the terms. Okay, the good thing is over. They spread it over 6 years, and it's at a 1% interest rate, which means it's low. It's a low cost of capital.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that, hey, that you can go look at other areas of your business and ask yourself, okay, all right, since you have to pay this loan back and you're going to have to cover the regular expenses of your business, what are you going to do today to increase your revenue, to increase your profit, so you will be able to pay this back when the payments start? Like, I think it's like, what, a year from now when you
Yeah.
have to start making payments. Like, are you going to have enough revenue to cover it? And I think, to be able to answer that question is not, hey, well, we'll figure that out when that time comes. It's no,
Right.
what are you going to do right now to make sure that you're growing your business, or you're cutting back on other expenses because now you need to make room for these payments at a later date?
Right. No, I agree. And I think just to add to that one point, I think another thing also is, even just in our personal finances, I think there's a tendency or a temptation to defer things and just say, I'll deal with that when I get there. But I think if you're a small business owner, I highly recommend, like Terrell said, really coming up with a strategy. Yes, understanding the economics, like what revenue do I need to make to sustain and to be able to cover this loan when I do eventually have to pay it back. But also just thinking about it. I mean, if you have a 6-year period to pay it off, like that's 6 years. Figure out, hey, how much do I need to put up? How much do I need to make? And I think this is what you're saying, Terrell. How much do I need to make on a monthly basis, not only to cover my expenses related to my business, but then also to be able to have enough money to save and enough money to put back into the business to over time. And the more spread out it is, the more advantageous it is to you. Because if you wait until like year 5, then that's a whole different conversation. Hopefully by that point, your business has grown to the point where you can sustain that. And it's a quick, just write the check and be done with it. But yeah, definitely something that you want to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think it really just comes down to, like I said, when you're in business, if you're going to run a business, one of the core things that you and I talk about, Lola, all the time is that, just people need to understand deal economics. They just need to understand the economics behind the decision that they're making. So,
Agree.
I'm curious as to, like, with the work you do as CFO from, with Fortune 500 companies as well as other companies, what have been kind of the things that you've seen when people think about, like I said, the economics of their decisions?
Ooh. Hmm. I think there's a few things that happen. I'm going to speak just more so in general, but I think, or speak specifically in sales because that's where I have kind of most of my experience specific to this. I think when you think sometimes about like trying to close a sale, right? And there's always this friction between, not always, but a lot of times there's friction between the sales team and the finance team, right? Sales is trying to close the deal. To them, that's what defines a good deal. Hey, I brought it in, I make my money, and I get my quota, right? But I think the additional step that you need to take, especially as a business owner, is a sale is great. A sale is amazing. A sale is awesome, but a profitable sale is even better when it comes to your business, right? And I think this actually falls in line with the whole not all money is good money, because I think a lot of times people are focused on selling so much that they don't really think about everything else that needs to be factored in. So for me, when it comes to actually your products and what you're selling, is it's great to make money and it's great to have revenue, but it's also much better to have profitable revenue, because I don't care how much money you make. If your cost exceeds the revenue that you're bringing into your business, you have a loss, right? So you don't have enough to not only cover the product that you're making, but you don't have enough to pay your employees, to pay yourself, to cover some of the other recurring parts of your business. So I'm speaking specifically to it when it comes to just the deal of the economics of a sale. Specifically. But I think it applies to anything, right? It's just not being so narrowly focused and thinking more so about all aspects of this deal, right? So when I think about even just with getting a loan, is you need to think realistically of, hey, can my business sustain the payback of this loan over X amount of time of whenever I need to pay it back? Like, those are some of the things you need to ask yourself. And it's so tempting to just be like, well, I just need the money now, I'm going to figure it out. But a lot of times having that conversation, that painful conversation ahead of time, avoids the pain that comes after the fact, right? So those are some of the things that I've seen. Yeah.
Yep. And I think that's a good point on the sales piece, because, I was on a call with a company, and that was one of the things that we were talking about, is like, they at the point where they were at, where they've taken on some deals and they've looked at some deals, and they've accepted these contracts with customers. But what they did not factor in is, well, how much is it going to cost us to actually deliver the
Yeah.
product that
Yeah.
or deliver the service that they're paying us for? And so in that case is a classic situation where, they're finding out that, hey, it's costing us more money to do the work than the customer can actually pay us. Which, to me, in that case, I would say, hey, the money that the customer is giving you, that's not good money, because
Yep.
it's actually costing you more than it's actually giving you.
Yep.
And when it comes down to making different decisions, I think you really just have to get down to that point where you understand what are the economics of the decision. Like, if we bring in this customer and we give them this kind of discount, well, you got to factor in, well, what are all the overhead costs that come along with servicing this customer? And if I add up all of the cost of this deal and I compare it to the price, is that profit margin, or, in some cases, unfortunately, profit loss, is that acceptable for where my business is? And I think a lot of people don't take the time to look at that.
I think the other thing also, if I'm being honest, and I'm speaking from experience specifically to our business, is a lot of times, especially when you're starting out, you just get excited about just selling, right? Like, somebody actually wants to use my services. Like, oh my gosh! Like, and then I think what ends up happening is you run into the risk of then over promising and under delivering. And I think that's, like, I've seen that at bigger companies than our business, and it's just one of those things where I think you get excited. It's a new product offering, or even if you're a business, right? Like, you're a small business owner, you're like, man, like, I'm excited. Like, somebody contacted me, like, even if you do, like, let's say coaching, right? And you have a corporate company reach out to you and like, hey, I really like the content that you're putting out. I would like for you to come in and do a coaching session and do some training with some of, our staff and our team. Can you do, 8 sessions over a 5-day period, every couple of hours? And you're like, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. I can make it happen. And it's like, guys, if you are a one-man shop, like, or one woman shop. You are the only person that's going to be doing these training sessions, 8 training sessions back to back for 5 days. Like, the money looks right, the money looks good, but another thing you have to consider is the cost of that decision. And I think, just to be honest, especially when you're starting out in the first few years of your business, you have to learn how to tell people no. Or you have to learn how to tell people, you know what, I'm going to have to scale back your expectations, because there's nothing worse than delivering or promising something to a customer and under delivering. You would much rather over or under promise and over deliver. And that's one of the things that I had to notice, even with our business. When we first started out in consulting, I remember talking to a few clients, and I don't even know why it took us this long to realize this, Terrell, because like, we knew from the beginning, like, when we would have conversations about taxes, like doing taxes for clients, it would always be this like painful conversation January 1st. Like, man, like, okay, we got to do tax returns. Like, we gotta people reaching out like, oh, do you do tax returns? Like, my uncle wants to get his tax returns. And you're just seeing the money. You're like, okay, $300 here, $1,000 here. Like, you're like, okay, this is good. But when you really think about it, like, we were not the best people to be doing taxes, not because we weren't good at it, but it's just, the reality is the excitement of what we were trying to do, like the excitement of like, hey, we can make this happen and we can do this, versus the actual ability that we had or the desire to even deliver, like, they weren't aligned. So
Yeah.
I think it's just sometimes as a business owner, like, you just have to be honest with yourself, and you just have to ask yourself, and tying this back to the point that Terrell had made, is really understand not just the economics of the deal from a standpoint of like, what is this going to cost me, but also being honest, because you don't want to run into a situation where you overpromise, you underdeliver, and then you lose that customer for good. You would much rather tell the customer like, hey, I can't do 8 sessions, right? Because you might not bring all of your energy to 8 sessions. Like, I can only do 2. And then if they like you, you over deliver on that. They love you. They want to bring you back. By that point, maybe you've built and scaled your business enough to where you can partner with other coaches or bring people on to come and do even a bigger scale. But that's just one thing that I've learned, is part of the deal economics is also understanding how to really gauge not just the cost, but also the promise of what you're trying to deliver.
Yeah.
And be honest with yourself. Yeah.
I would say to that point, I mean, I do think that there also is an element to consider that, what a lot of small business owners, especially those in the service business, what they find themselves in is they commit to something and they still deliver on it, but they regret it afterwards, because they're like, man, this isn't worth the amount of money I'm getting paid. This isn't
Yeah,
worth my time. And part of it,
that's
or
true.
this isn't worth the effort.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I tell a lot of businesses, especially if you're in growth mode and you're hiring employees, because at some point, you're going to have to start hiring more higher caliber talent, which
That's right.
means that's more expensive. So you
Mhm.
want to start to understand, hey, what does your cost structure look like as you grow? And
Yeah.
to make sure that you're going after clients or you're going after deals that fit the profile of where your business is. Because when you first
Yeah.
started off as a one person show, your cost structure was, X or whatever.
Yeah.
Your cost structure was very minimal. But as you start to grow, your cost structure is going to grow. And I think that's where it comes back to understanding the deal economics, or understanding the economics of where you are right now, so
Yep.
you start making great decisions. Now, I know you guys have heard me mention that. So before we wrap up, one of the things that I want to pull up is, for the Business Talk Library University, we have several different courses. And one of the courses that we created, because this was a repetitive thing that has come up, is understanding deal economics. And in this course, what we do is we kind of dive into walking through some scenarios of, hey, here's the deal, and here's kind of how we think about it to make sure that you come out in a positive way related to this deal. And as Lola mentioned, I mean, I think every deal is negotiable, because what I tell a lot of people, even if you're taking money from the bank or whatever, one of the things that you run into is that it is negotiable. You can come back and say, hey, you know what? These are their terms that they presented to you. Well, hey, what if I do this? Or what if I increase the down payment? Or, hey, what if I change this? What can we change in the deal? Because once you start to understand the economics of your situation, especially when it comes down to, let's say, if you're talking with customers and you're negotiating price, what if the customer comes back? Because we do it a lot. Because if a customer says, well, hey, this is what I can afford for these services, then all right, let's
What you gonna get?
adjust. Yeah, well, let's adjust the package for what you can afford. Let's
Right.
not give you the full, we're not going to give you the premium service for the base price.
And
It's,
I think
hey,
another thing, yeah, to mention there is that's okay. Like if you can't afford that, that's fine. And just be honest about that. And then that way, I'm also not doing you a disservice by being, I guess, not giving you the best of what it is you can afford for where you are, right? And there isn't that friction, like I can fully deliver. So yeah, absolutely. I think the understanding deal economics is a great course, and Terrell always does a great job breaking stuff down. So absolutely check it out. And remember, guys, like not all money is good money. And what else, Terrell?
I would say not all money is good money, and it's a learning process.
It
So,
is.
so
It is.
definitely don't beat yourself up, because you may go back and look and be like, yeah, I've taken out a loan before and it wasn't. Don't beat yourself up. I mean,
I
being owning a
agree.
business is a learning process. Just make
Yeah.
sure you're learning moving forward.
Yes, and we're not here to beat you up. We're here to help you and give you the information that you need to go make that decision. So now that, if you've taken out a loan and you're in a position where you're like, man, what am I going to do? Just like we said, start to make a plan to pay that back, start to think of the deal economics as far as everything else is concerned. And hey, take this course because it's going to be a great one for you. So thank you so much, guys, for tuning in to another episode of Small Business CFOs. Like we said, finance should not be the most complicated part of your business. And here at Small Business CFOs, we're here to make things simpler for you. Until next time.